Good afternoon. Justin Reedy here, coming to you from my home office at the end of the 2024 General Assembly session. I enjoyed weekly updating you on the progress of things that were happening in Annapolis, and after Monday night at midnight, the session concluded, and it's a famous saying that no man's life or liberty is safe when the legislature is in session anywhere. So we are out of session now, and the politicians in Annapolis can not really do any more damage until next January, when we'll convene again in our 2025 session. I wanted to go over with you a few of the wins and some of the things that I think were losses that happened during the session. I'm going to be rolling out an end of session letter that will have a lot of detail on several items, some of these things that I'll mention and more. And we'll be posting that online, sending it out via email and getting it out there. But I wanted to share with you, I think, to start with, oftentimes being dramatically outnumbered as a Republican in the Senate, there are, people will ask, you go down there, does it feel like you're beating your head against a wall? And, there are days where it does feel that way, but there's also a lot of times where by being ready, being focused every day and in the fight, we have a tremendous impact as Republican legislators, as a Republican state senator, in the overall debate. There are times that because of principled stands, we develop respect with colleagues where you can raise objections and raise things that are concerns and work with people, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, on trying to find solutions to problems. So we did some of that this session. I felt we had an impact in that way. But to start with, I think some of the good news that came out of session was the House Democrats, the leadership of the House delegates, the Democratic leadership there wanted to raise taxes. There's several major tax increase proposals totaling over $4 billion. Sales tax increase was floated, expanding the sales tax to all manner of services that are not currently taxed. There was then they actually passed over to the Senate during the budget process. They passed a bill with about $1.4 billion in tax and fee increases, and it's including a tax on increasing the tax on trade-ins for cars. There was a tax there that would increase tax on corporate businesses that would have made us even less competitive with states around us. And there was a number of other transportation-related taxes. At the end of the day, the good news was most of the tax increases that were proposed, including all of the broad-based sort of sales tax, income tax type increases, they all were defeated, as well as a really bad bill that the Senate actually passed, that the House helped us kill, that wanted to nearly double the sales tax on guns, firearm accessories, and ammunition, which would have done really nothing to help solve the problem of firearm violence and crime, but would have helped put out of business a lot of our small businesses that sell firearms in the state, and just had been probably driven more people to buy their stuff out of state. So that was defeated in the House, and so that was good news. Also, we did have, dealing with juvenile crime, which has been out of control in the state, we did pass a comprehensive juvenile justice reform, which you have to be careful how you use that word, because part of the big mess was caused by so-called juvenile justice reform that made it much harder for police and other partners to deal with underage juveniles who were committing crimes. There were several things in that bill that improved the ability for law enforcement to even deal with 10, 11, 12-year-olds who they cannot arrest now because of state law. But while we did not restore the ability for them to be arrested, although I would have been fine with that, the bill does have some very clear consequences and accountability for those juveniles. It forces parents to be more involved, and also gives the system, the Department of Juvenile Services system, a lot more responsibility and accountability to get the job done and work with our law enforcement partners. So that was a positive. And we also, had a number of soft on crime bills that we were able to defeat, including a really bad bill that I fought. Actually got a floor amendment on this bill, which is hard to do. I got by one vote, I was able to do something to kind of impact this bill, but it still passed the Senate. Thankfully, it ran out of time in the House. This bill was called the Second Look Act, and it was going to give anybody after they had served 20 years of a sentence, no matter how serious the sentence of the crime, was going to give them an automatic opportunity to go and petition the judge to revisit their sentence. And then once they turned 60, they could do it again. That bill failed in the House. It ran out of time, and that we were able to slow it up enough in the Senate, and then it ran out of time in the House. So that was good that was defeated. On the bad side, however, on the tax things, there's been a lot of news about how no major tax increases passed, and that's somewhat true, but it was a little bit of a bait and switch. We still ended up in the final sort of BRFA negotiations with the budget, we still ended up with basically doubling the car registration tax that everybody pays, also tying the registration rate to weight of vehicle, which will make the number of people's registration go up. It does capture electric vehicles, and electric vehicles will pay an extra registration charge now, which I actually agree with that part because they were not paying any gas tax. But overall, it is putting a greater burden onto the people who are driving to pay for transportation trust fund needs, which is fine in some ways, but our transportation trust fund continues to siphon over half of it towards mass transit. And mass transit riders pay a tiny, tiny percentage of the overall cost of running the system. And I had legislation this year that didn't pass to try to force that percentage to go up, because I think if drivers are subsidizing mass transit to such a large degree, we need to be sure that mass transit systems have better percentages of recovery. That bill didn't pass. So that was some bad news, that the cost of living in Maryland will still continue to go up because of car registration taxes increasing. Some of that increase will go towards shock trauma. The other parts will go towards the transportation trust fund. It also doubled fines for if you are speeding in a work zone, but they're going to have the cameras on all the time, not just if workers are present. So again, something that you shouldn't be speeding in work zones, but sometimes people are going fast, nobody's there, they're still going to be having to pay double fines whether there are workers present or not. So a lot of things, that about a $400 million increase in taxes. So even though we killed over $4 billion in major tax increases for drivers particularly, as well as people who vape or smoke cigarettes, that tax went up as well somewhat as part of that $400 million package. That's all money that will come into the state in out years. But that, to me, was very bad news, that our state continues, even though there were promises not to raise taxes, they seem to think that a car registration tax isn't the same as any other tax, but it is. So that was bad news. Also bad news, and I'll probably stop here as far as just breaking down different bills, but we had a lot of very strong, positive, pro-law and order bills that we put in as a Senate Republican caucus. I've talked about my bill to try to make theft of and possession of a firearm a felony. That bill got attached and got out of the Senate, attached to another bill. The House sort of stripped it off, played some games, ended up passing a bill back over to us, a different bill that had that in it, but was also tied to getting rid of or reducing sentences for volume drug dealers. So that bill didn't pass the Senate coming back. So unfortunately, a lot of games were played, and we really didn't, with the exception of the juvenile bill, which was a good bill that passed, we did not do a whole lot to deal with violent crime and gun crime, crime committed by people with firearms, which they say, Democrats in Annapolis always love to go after law-abiding gun owners, but when it's time to actually put the screws to people who are committing crimes with firearms, it's like pulling teeth to get anything done. I'm not going to give up. We came very close this year to getting that passed, and we're going to continue fighting on that. So this is a bit of a longer video. I wanted to share some of the things that I thought were the highlights from the session. There's so much more I could talk about, from the state continuing to double down on subsidizing offshore wind energy to the exclusion of other types of renewable energies that actually make more sense and make more financial sense, and continuing to, like I said, punish drivers. And one last piece of good news: the last day we were able to hold off a bill that was going to try to make every major road project be in the future subjected to an analysis of how it increases greenhouse gas and drive time, which would basically give them an excuse to kill lots of road projects in the future. We actually were able to stop that bill and hold it off on the Senate floor through delaying and some of the filibuster techniques that we have at our disposal. We can't really sustain a filibuster in the Senate. We don't have enough votes. We need 19, and we only have 13 Republicans. But there's times that we can at least talk some stuff for a while when we get late in session, and it makes them want to just move on to other things. So we were able to do that a little bit here at the end of the session. So a lot more I could talk about. I would look forward to communicating with everyone during the interim. I will be putting my the end of session letter out there. I was working with our Delegate Rose and Delegate Tomlinson on, and we'll have a breakdown of a lot of the major things that we've dealt with. I look forward to talking to you all in the future, and hope you have a great weekend. God bless.